Do you remember your first job? I'm not talking about the neighbor paying you to feed her cat while she was out of town, although that was probably an easy source of income. No, I'm talking about the first job where you had to apply and interview and show up at a certain time. I clearly remember my first job. It was at a shoe store, and at first I was proud of myself for choosing a job that was easy. After all, I thought, how hard could it be to stack shoes? Surely you have to help a customer every once in a while, but I love fashion and I especially love shoes. So this was basically like shoe shopping as a job. I couldn't believe they were going to pay me for this. You could probably see where this is going. By the end of the first week, I was exhausted. I was sore from lifting pallets of size 13 work boots onto the top shelf. I was worn out from being on my feet all day. But maybe more than anything, I was emotionally spent from dealing with customers. People can get pretty snippy when it comes to their shoe shopping. And at the end of each day, I couldn't wait to get home and not talk to anyone. Nobody had told me how much work it was going to be. Now, last week we talked about how we were all made to work. Specifically, we were all made in the image of a God who is active and at work all the time. And we were made to reflect Him by being worshipful in our work. Maybe like me, you found yourself thinking, that's great, God likes to work. But God also has an infinite amount of energy. He can merely speak things into existence. It takes me a little more effort than that to even make a sandwich. So how am I supposed to worship God through my work when most of the time just getting through the day leaves me exhausted? Now that's a great question. Just like every other week of this series, we're going to begin at the beginning, at creation. Specifically today, we're going to look at what happened after creation. For 7 days, God spoke and formed everything into existence. From the universe to our planet, to oceans, to animals, to people, it was an amazing burst of creativity, power, and work. So what did God do once He'd finished this extraordinary work week? He rested. That's right. The God who doesn't run out of energy, the one who doesn't run out of things to do, the Creator who doesn't run out of creativity or stamina or inspiration, He took a day off. Growing up, I always thought that was so strange. I wondered why God would do that. It's not like He needed the break. I mean, He's God. But maybe the day of rest wasn't entirely about Him. Maybe, in His wisdom, He had an entirely different purpose in mind. Whether or not you grew up in church, there's a good chance you've heard about an ancient leader of the Israelite people named Moses. If not, here's the short version of his story. For generations, the Israelites, God's people, had been working as slaves in Egypt. Ultimately, their manual labor helped build the country into a superpower. Then one day, the Egyptian leader realized that his pool of free workers had grown into almost a mini nation within his own nation. He began to view his ever-growing population as a threat to Egypt's sovereignty. By the time Moses was born, the Israelite people had spent so much time in bondage, there's a good chance no one could even remember what it was like to live as free people. Slavery was all they knew. But then God used Moses to lead His people from the foreign rule in Egypt to a new land where they could finally be free people again and live as a true nation under God's leadership. Not long into their journey as free people, God gives Moses 10 commandments for the people to follow. You're probably familiar with at least some of the commandments. They're easy to find, and the things they command us are pretty obvious. Don't murder, don't steal, don't commit adultery. Nothing unusual about those. But for the Israelites, these new laws might not have been so obvious. They'd been under cruel leadership for so long. They'd lived without the freedom of choice for so long that it may have been difficult to know where to start as a new society of free people. The old ways wouldn't work in their new world. So the 10 Commandments were more than just good rules to follow. They were God's guide on how the Israelites could live as free people. And here's a commandment that can sometimes get less press than others. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the 7th day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work. Basically, God was saying, thou shalt take a day off. Strange, right? But remember, the Israelites were coming from a life of slavery where they had no days off ever. So to them, This law was unlike anything they'd heard before. This was about more than having a day when they could sleep in. This was a reminder, each and every week, of how God was different than Pharaoh. God had compassion for them. For the ancient Israelites, taking a day off wasn't about having another rule to follow. It was about learning to live in the new freedom God had given them. It was about remembering the way God had set the example for them at the very beginning of creation and trusting Him enough to follow in His footsteps. Every day of not working was time set aside to remember who God is, what He had done, and how He could be trusted. That was so different than their previous leaders who constantly wanted more from them but never wanted anything for them. Maybe you've had a boss who never seemed satisfied, who didn't seem to care about your family time or family boundaries, who wasn't bothered that you were exhausted or overwhelmed or overworked. Life in Egypt is kind of like that. And fresh out of that situation, it's like God is reminding His people, that's not me. I'm nothing like Pharaoh. I'm not like that bad boss. I'm the kind of boss you've always dreamed of. And by the way, I'm the kind of boss who knows how much you can handle and when you need rest because I designed your body. I designed your soul. I wired you so I know how you best function. Life with me isn't a different kind of Egypt. It's a new way of life entirely. In many ways, He is saying the same to us. He's inviting us to a new kind of life, or better yet, the kind of life He designed for us and even modeled for us in the very beginning. A life where we work with purpose and we rest while trusting He is in control and things will be okay. In short, we were made for rest. When it comes to rest, we could learn from the Ten Commandments. Maybe for you, an entire day of rest isn't possible. If you're not working somewhere, you're working at home, taking care of kids or parents or a sick loved one. But just like the Israelites, you need to know that to be free, you need rest. And rest is about more than just taking a day off or taking a day to sleep. It involves finding rest for your mind too. And your mind could use rest. But how do I know? Because television spends billions of dollars to have your attention. So does Facebook. Then there's every other social media app. Then there are friends and family and the kids or the grandkids, sporting events. Oh, there's your job too. That requires plenty of focus. And all of this noise works. These things get our attention, so much so that it can be tempting to let our minds work 24/7 and never give them a break. But if research is accurate, this kind of constant thinking doesn't make us smarter or more successful. In fact, it's the opposite. The more time we spend working, even mentally, without resting, the less efficient we become, and the longer our work takes. That's because we weren't made for 24/7 work. It was never God's design for us to work or even serve in church to the point that we have no fuel left in the tank. God isn't interested in you working yourself so hard your body and your mind and your spirit are fried. He doesn't want you engaging in a faith that makes you think you have to do more to be better. He wants you to pursue a faith where there's time and a place for rest. Jesus clarified this message when He said this, "Come to me, all of you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Think about that for a second. Jesus isn't mad when we rest. In fact, He offers it. He isn't disappointed when we take a day off to relax. No, He actually requires it. You follow a God who wants you to relax, slow down, and rest. Your body, your heart, your mind, your attention, your emotions. Of course, talking about rest is easier than actually doing it, right? There are all sorts of situations that can make rest or taking a Sabbath complicated. That's why small group conversations like these are so important. It's in conversation that we work out not just why we should do certain things, but how. As you get ready for your small group conversation this week, spend some time thinking about this. In which of these areas do you need to rest right now? Is it your body, your mind, your attention? Maybe your heart and emotions? What prevents you from resting in that one area? Maybe for you, rest would be easy if finances allowed it. Or rest for your mind would be more of a possibility if work didn't keep emailing you. Maybe emotional rest would be nice, but your current circumstances just don't seem to allow for it. Just like in every area of life, your Heavenly Father wants to provide for your needs. So if you need more time or more resources to make rest possible, ask Him. He will never turn away from His child asking to live in the way that He designed them to live. In many ways, that's what this entire series is about. A good father who wants his children that He created to experience and enjoy living in the way He designed them to live. Whether that means living in community, going outside for prayer, standing up for someone's dignity, working or resting, it all requires a measure of trust. Trust that we weren't made by random chance. Instead, we were made on purpose, which means that God's design for us really is the best way to live. Maybe before this series, it never occurred to you that the way you're designed as a human points to more than just your humanity. That there's a God who uses everything, including you, to point you toward a relationship with Him because He wants to be close to you. If so, I hope you'll talk with your small group or your leader about what it looks like to live connected to your Heavenly Father through Jesus. After all, when it comes to connection with God, you were made for it. Even if you've been following Him for a long time, I hope you've noticed how the way you were made reflects your Maker. And I hope you're reminded that every human you meet is made in His image.